The word Atma. I think you might have explained this before, but I want to ask you again. The word Atma means I, Aham. So that is a Uttama Purusha Ekavachana, Aham. Now, the word Atma is also translated as self, S-E-L-F, self. And that is Pratama Purusha Ekavachana. Why it is translated as self and also as Aham?
Okay, so first, it's not Pratama Purusha. It is nominative case. Prathama Vibhakti. I think you must have meant Prathama Vibhakti. Okay, not Prathama Purusha. Purusha is for verbs. Atma is not a verb, it's a noun. And so Prathama.
What is Aham?
Aham is Prathama Vibhakti, you know, I. I is a subject.
Is it not also Aham is the Uttama Purusha Ekavachana?
So Aham Patami, I study. Yeah. That Patami is Uttama Purusha Ekavachana. Correct. But Aham is not a verb. Prathama Purusha Ekavachanam, if you say, you are referring to a verb. You are referring to a verb. Aham. So Aham Pravakshe. Here Krishna is saying Pravakshe. Pravakshe also is Uttama Purusha Ekavachanam. Okay.
Atmanepadi.
Atmanepadi. Aham Pravakshe. So Aham is implied, right? Aham is implied in that statement. So I think you mean, first of all, that Uttama Purusha Ekavachanam is the Pravakshe. Aham is the subject. As subject is Prathama Vibhakti Ekavachanam, or it can be Bahuvachanam, depending. Here in this case, Aham Pravakshi. So Aham is there. So your question now is?
My question is, self is Prathama Purusha Ekavachana. It is not Aham. It is not Uttama Purusha Ekavachana. Why these two differences?
No, see.
What is self? What is SCLF, self?
So there is a noun and there's a verb. Okay, the noun is not a verb, verb is not a noun, correct? So the verb, whenever the verb comes, Pravakshe, Gachami, Patami, all this me comes, then that's the Uttama Purusha. That is what you're referring to. Uttama Purusha Ekavachan. I may have said Prathama Purusha, but it's Uttama Purusha. And then to that subject, Aham is the subject of that sentence. Okay. In general, Aham. Aham in a sentence means I did this, I did that, etc. Right? That is I. So here, Atma is the word Atma is used because there is a confusion around I. There's a confusion around I. What am I is there is some confusion. The clarity is not there about I. Therefore, sometimes the word Atma, if the context, sometimes the context of Atma can be Ahankara. Okay, Uddhared Atman Atmanam. Help yourself by yourself. That is what we studied, right? Uddhared Atman Atmanam. So that that Atma is what? Help yourself. Make your own effort and help yourself. Correct? Take whatever help you want and then better yourself. Okay? That is Uddhared Atman Atman. So there, Atma, it doesn't refer, that Atma refers to what? This self, this Jiva, this Ahankara, the person who needs help. Atma cannot need help. So there is a person who needs help, and then there is Atma who doesn't need help. Atma is the content of me. Atma is the satyam of me. And the body is mithya, mind is mithya, even ahankara is mithya. The mithya ahankara says, I did this, I did that, I must do it. I have been sleeping too late, etc. That ahankara is saying that, correct? Atma is not saying that. Atma doesn't say anything. Poor Atma cannot speak. Only the upadhi is needed. When the upadhi comes, then all the speech and all these things happen. Therefore, to distinguish that Atma, the Atma which is associated with the body, mind and senses as ahankara, that ahankara is there, let it be. And then this Atma, which is the content of ahankara itself, is called self sometimes, just to indicate that contrast. Atma, the word Atma is used, and that Atma is translated as self with an uppercase S also. Okay. Pratyagatma, if you want another word for that, that's why Pratyagatma, to be very explicit, Pratyagatma. So Pratyagatma cannot have different meanings like Atma can have. Atma, we said, have two meanings. What are the two meanings? One is the Satchidananda Atma. The other is not the Satchidananda Atma. Hankara also it can be. Can be the body also. Manas also Atma. Atmana. So that Atmana there is by yourself, by your mind. Okay. So there Atma can mean different things, but Pratyek Atma cannot have those meanings. That word Pratyek makes it just, yeah, that Satchidananda Atma is Pratyek Atma. Yeah, you can unmute yourself.
So when you say I, capital I, you are referring to Satchidananda Atma.
Depending on the context.
Depending on the context. Okay. Same thing, self is also depending upon the context. Does it mean Pratyagatma?
So if you're asking me, the translations, in the translations where they use the word, English word is self with an uppercase S, what does that mean? My guess has to be, unless I see the context, I won't know. But my guess is they're referring to Pratyagatma. It's a safe guess because there is no need to use that word self unless it is referring to Pratyagatma. Okay? Unless the author has not made a mistake. So yeah, self is Pratyagatma. That is one way to look at it. Yeah.
Is there any difference between a capital S and a small s?
See, that you have to ask all the writers. I didn't discover this. I didn't invent this formula. But yeah, so they are referring to, but oh, it's not your ordinary self, not yourself. It is not yourself, small, yes, and all that. It is not small thing. Atma is the only thing. So you give it uppercase S. So that's the way I used to read it. God. Suppose I write God with a lowercase g. What is wrong with it? You have
Nothing.
to understand. Nothing. No difference. Exactly. No. Then why nobody writes God with the lowercase g? I have not seen lowercase g for God. I think he'll get upset maybe if I put lowercase. He wants uppercase. Same reason, self also. But I think it's good. It's good to keep it uppercase also because it distinguishes. Okay, you don't confuse the word self with something else. Myself, yourself. That self is lowercase self. That is the ordinary self, the transacting self. This uppercase self is a non-transacting self. Satchidananda. So I think there is some value to that. We should not.
The lowercase self is maybe the body. The uppercase is the Pratyekash Atma.
Yeah, exactly.
What about in Aham Brahmasmi?
What about Aham Brahmasmi? Yeah. So I think Ramesh ji is asking, in Aham Brahmasmi, is it lowercase s or uppercase s? Aham is self. That he's saying it is self. But then should it be written as lowercase or uppercase? I would put it as uppercase. Pratyegatma Brahma Asti. Asti. Or Pratyegatma Brahma Asmi. Aham Pratyegatma Brahma Asmi. That's the way it
We
has
are
to be.
referring here Atma, and then uppercase upper will be appropriate.
Yeah, so fair enough. So those are all language, English language nuances. But what we understand is critical. And so, yeah, uppercase S, self, is appropriate for that. Sometimes they just leave it as I am Brahma. I am Brahma. Uppercase I. But their uppercase I applies everywhere. I am having Rasagulla also, uppercase I only. I am Brahma is also uppercase I.
Correct. So,
So that's a limitation of English. We have to go back to our English teachers and say, this is, you took me on the wrong track. You did not even tell me there's a language called Sanskrit. And so we can have an agitation. No, so that's the thing. That's the limitation of English, really speaking. English mein nahi hai. You don't have Atma that is different from body, etc. That concept. Soul. Soul, they say sometimes. Soul. So then what? But they don't have this idea of Aham Brahmasmi is not there. Aham Brahmasmi is a sacrilegious statement. It deserves punishment. To say a statement like that deserves punishment. You are going to burn in hell, okay, for saying that. So therefore in English, we don't expect these kinds of things. We use English, no doubt. We are happy and we use English, but we also understand its limitations. So sometimes you can't figure out that I, what it stands for. But in Sanskrit, etc., Hindi, other Tamil languages, we can.
ಶಲಕನ್ವನಿ ಕಳಿಸ್ಬೇಕಂತೆ ಅವನಿಗೂ ಕೊಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅಂತ ಕೊಟ್ಟು ಬರ್ತವಾ ಅಂತೀಯ
Okay.
okay. Thank you. Dhanyavad.
May I say a few words about pranayama?
Yeah, please do, Satyaji, please.
Initially, I was not familiar and did not know the effect of pranayama until I was listening to a young lady who talked about Panchakosha and then pranayama. When I practiced it, I found the real difference in my physiology. And Ramana Maharshi mentions in two areas, Upadesa Sara and
Vayurodhanat gliyate manaha jala pakshivat rodha sadhanam. He says that.
And also in Sri Arunachala Pancharatnam, verse number 4. This is absolutely practical and very useful in preparation for dhyana because it calms the mind. And there is a physiological reason why it happens. The respiratory center or the breathing center is located in Broca's area 20. It's the brain areas are mapped and are given numbers. So the breathing center is located at Broca's area 20. And the emotional center is absolutely adjacent to it. So by voluntary control of the breathing, you can control the emotional center.
So area 20, what can you repeat that phrase? Some area 20?
BROCA, Broca.
Broca area 20.
BROCAS, Broca's area. There's the name of a physician who really mapped the surface of the brain, just like various states in the United States map. So the various parts of the brain are mapped and are given numbers and are associated with the different bodily functions, the nervous control of the various body functions. The important thing is by practicing pranayama, you are oxygenating your brain better. And when you take deep breath, the expansion of the lungs produces a reflex called Herring-Breuer reflex. Again, the names of two physicians who coined the term, and they recognize that reflex. And when you take deep breath, the diaphragm, that is the division between the chest and the abdomen, goes down and stimulates the vagal system or parasympathetic nervous system. That reduces the sympathetic activity, reduces the heart rate, reduces the blood pressure, reduces the skin temperature, all the opposite of hyperactivity, so to speak, or a distress situation. So the longer one can take the deep breath and hold it, the more parasympathetic effect and more antidotal effect of the sympathetic hyperactivity. So I'm sure
before you go, so the sympathetic means hyperactivity, parasympathetic means opposite of hyperactivity, so calming down. Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
So I'm sure all of us heard from several people when somebody is upset, they say, take a few deep breaths. Even though they might not know the mechanism, how it helps, but they know the result of taking deep breaths. So it is not something new that was discovered, but the physiology has been discovered, how it produces the calming effect. So I think pranayama prior to or immediately before dhyana is a very essential and absolutely useful tool to practice. At least that's my experience. I just wanted to share it with you all.
Yeah, so that was good. That is good to know, and no doubt about that. And so is this, are more and more doctors and hospitals encouraging this practice? Is it becoming more, shall I say, common or mainstream, or how is that?
It is. It has been a very common thing, and actually a lot of research was done at Harvard University. There is a Body Mind Center at Harvard University, and Herbert Benson, cardiologist who was a co-founder of that center, along with a psychologist, I'm forgetting the name, but they have done studies. They could measure the cerebral activity or the brain activity during pranayama and immediately following pranayama, and also by measuring expired gases, just like carbon dioxide, one will measure by measuring the nitric oxide in the expired gases or breathing out gases. One can estimate the metabolic activity of the brain, and also by drawing the blood from the blood vessels that are coming from the brain into the heart, taking the samples, they can measure the oxygen saturation and figure out how much oxygen was consumed by the brain, whether it is hyper or lower hypo metabolic activity. So various biometric studies have been done to figure out the benefit of pranayama. It is not just postulation, it's not a hypothesis, it's proven beyond doubt. At least I exist.
Excellent, excellent. So Narayanji, you've been doing some research on this also. Any connections, any other thoughts?
Yeah, there's some, okay, I have a different take on this. Pranayama does not increase oxygen saturation. Pranayama increases carbon dioxide saturation in the blood. Breathing, deep breathing increases oxygen saturation, whereas in pranayama, what you are trying to do is you're trying to have different ratios of inhalation, holding, and exhalation. Moment you're, the typical process is 1:2:4. When you talk of Nadi Shuddhi pranayama, is 1 count of inhalation, 2 counts of holding, 4 counts of exhalation. Your carbon dioxide saturation is constantly increasing. That is the reason we say pranayama is not DIY. It has to be done only with an experienced practitioner, because brain cells are extremely sensitive to carbon dioxide levels in the blood. So what Satyaji mentioned about deep inhalation is a breathing practice. Okay, you may call it pranayama because you're trying to regulate the process of breathing. But in actual yoga terms, when you talk about pranayama, it is inhalation. I mean, Puraka, Kumbhaka, Rechaka, Kumbhaka again.
Right.
Right. So there you are increasing carbon dioxide saturation. So what typically happens when you're increasing carbon dioxide saturation is, at some point in time, the hypothalamus of the brain starts triggering, saying that I'm running out of breath. It wants to force the breathing happen. But you are exercising voluntary control. And because you're exercising voluntary control, you're constantly increasing carbon dioxide level. That is why bandha comes in. Bandha comes in, you're trying to regulate the flow of sensory signals also towards the brain.
To protect the brain.
To
So,
protect.
so when
So, Narayanji, when you take the deep breath and holding, gradually it does increase the lung capacity.
So
All the lung capacities increases during the breathing exercises. And then vital capacity, and then also tidal volume. And then also your point is well taken about increasing the carbon dioxide. That triggers the next breath. Carbon dioxide is an essential part to trigger the breath. That's also important. And it's not necessarily bad as long as in the controlled situation, you can increase the vital capacity. And then over the time, especially when you're doing the swimming, when you take a breath, do the few strokes, and then gradually increase it to the point. First day you may do like a 10 feet, and then gradually when you're trying, you can go up to 50 feet.
Yeah.
So we need to distinguish between what we call as breathing practice and pranayama. The definition of pranayama is different. So a lot of people say that because I'm exercising control over the breath, it is pranayama. Pranayama from a yogic concept is different. So breathing,
that's
what we say is do deep breathing, hold your breaths, swimming, aerobic activity, all that will increase your lung capacity, no doubt about that. But the purpose of pranayama is totally different, or the objective of pranayama is different. Objective of pranayama is to slowly gain control over your body functions.
So Narayanji, so this when somebody is suppose breathing in, okay, I'm breathing in and then I'm holding it for a few seconds. I'm holding it, maybe 7-10 seconds. Then I am going to exhale it out, okay, from the other. Now tell me what happens to the oxygen concentration as the inhalation goes on. Then what happens as it is held, and then what happens when it comes down? How is that oxygen?
So typically the way the breathing process happens when you're talking of involuntary control is the body is a closed loop feedback system, right? All your sensory nerves and motor nerves terminate in the hypothalamus pituitary axis, which govern the involuntary functional activity. So moment it starts seeing a rise in carbon dioxide level, there is a signal that goes to the diaphragm to move downwards, create a suction in the lungs, so air enters into the lungs, so the process of breathing happens. And similarly, when oxygen saturation increases, there is another signal to the diaphragm to move upwards. So there's a high pressure created in the lungs, evacuation happens from the lung. So that is the process of breathing, simple, which normally happens involuntary, you don't even recognize that. So what you do in the first step is that you do forceful breathing. You start inhaling by pulling the diaphragm down, and you start exhaling by pushing the diaphragm up. So moment the air comes in, there is an exchange through the process of osmosis that happens in the lungs. Right? When carbon dioxide and oxygen move across the blood lung cell barrier. And that happens more or less instantly, maybe for a longer duration. If you hold a longer breath, the volume of air increases, so the volume of exchange improves. Now, after in the case of the pranayama, what you practice from the yogic form is like when you take your breath in and then you are holding the breath. Oxygen exchange has already happened. Now, what is being generated in the blood is carbon dioxide. You constantly keep holding the carbon dioxide within the body because you're holding and then you're exhaling much more slowly. So gradually the concentration of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood is going to change. Because carbon dioxide saturation is constantly increasing, metabolic rate starts falling. Because metabolic rate starts falling, your thought process starts falling. So that's how it works.
I'm sorry to disagree with you. I can give you a reference also. The book written by Herbert Benson is called Relaxation Response. And as a matter of fact, you can Google and you'll find lots of references to his work. I think the way you are describing, you're mixing the spontaneous autonomic function versus voluntary respiratory control. They are not alike. They are two different situations.
They're different.
And when you are doing voluntarily, you control the depth of inspiration and the duration of expiration. So you're not retaining the carbon dioxide. By slowly exhaling, you're completely excreting the retained carbon dioxide that has been there during cessation of the breathing for whatever period of time you have practiced. So there's not going to be any cumulative effect on the brain with the carbon dioxide. I think I don't want to waste your time, but I would request you to look up Relaxation Response by Herbert Benson, H-E-R-B-E-R-T, Herbert B-E-N-S-O-N, Mind Body Institute of Harvard University. He's a cardiologist by training, but he also happened to be John Kabat-Zinn and Herbert Benson. They co-founded the Mind Body Institute, and a lot of research has been done. And you can see the graphic representation of various gases that are inhaled and exhaled in different concentrations during various phases of breathing.
Yeah, so regardless of how we explain it, the concentration is measurable. So as one breathes in and then holds the breath, and then as one breathes out, the concentration is fixed. I mean, it can be measurable. And so that's what I'm interested in, which is, can we say both oxygen and carbon dioxide are being inhaled, but oxygen is in a higher proportion. And then body takes all that oxygen. So I presume as we inhale, the oxygen concentration in the blood should be increasing. And then it's happened very fast, obviously. And then when I start holding it, then at that point, what oxygen as carbon dioxide starts to increase, oxygen is reduced. No more oxygen coming in. So oxygen will continue to remain probably reduced, maybe not much, but carbon dioxide concentration keeps increasing as I hold my breath. Let's say I hold it for 10 seconds, and then carbon dioxide keeps on increasing because it's getting generated. Whatever little oxygen is there, I suppose it's getting consumed. And so oxygen reduces. And then I exhale. And so now the concentration of carbon dioxide is being exhaled in a majority. And so I suppose it's majority, right? I'd like to know what is the fraction of carbon dioxide versus other as from the exhaling air. And then that's exhaled. And then, okay, now I feel better. And then, of course, I have to inhale now. I can't exhale anymore. Then the process repeats. So I'm kind of curious, the concentration, how it varies.
Right. Before we end the conversation, I want to make one remark. Let us not forget the impact of pranayama on parasympathetic system and sympathetic nervous system, because that is the area of interest for us. You can describe the cycles, respiratory cycles, and the various gases exchange and whatnot. But the important thing is how one would calm his mind or her mind during pranayama is because of the stimulation of the parasympathetic system and suppressing the sympathetic system. That is the most important point for us.
Right, absolutely. That's granted. That's granted. Yeah.
Guruji, here the thing is both of them are actually going in the right direction. One is pranayama, one is talking about breathing. Pranayama is about holding also. Breathing doesn't involve holding the breath. Deep breathing practices obviously tends to balance the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system because it works on the precortical brain, precortex, which is mostly associated with voluntary functions. So it triggers the vagal nerve. So vagal nerve is very important because it is the one which activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So any voluntary action is directly associated with vagal nerve function. That is the reason even mindfulness is being emphasized upon these days, because once the vagal nerve is associated with your day-to-day voluntary functions, if you are very conscious about what you're doing, then the emotional balance is, a person can attain the emotional balance. He is very intuitive as well. It also works as in intuitional processes. This is very clear. Actually, here Satyaji is talking about deep breathing practices where parasympathetic and sympathetic balance is attained. Naranji is talking about holding the breath, what process happens, and eventually you train with the help of a guru to balance your parasympathetic nervous system and get control over the pranas. This is superficial breathing, oxygen, carbon dioxide. This is more to do with pancha pranas, where apana, udana, everything is engaged. Eventually they learn to train the pranas. So meridians, and this is more of nerves.
Okay. Good. Very good discussion. Yeah, if there's any some simple article like somebody like me can understand, I'll be happy to, I don't mind reading it. And Satyaji also. Something for a lay person. I don't want to get into all the details.
Satyaji, what's your comment on it? Is it clear? I think I was okay in explaining your understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. The nervous system is a very complex one, as you know. The prefrontal cortex, medial cingulate gyrus, and different parts of the brain that are influenced during emotional activity. But the takeaway, what is the takeaway message? Is practice of pranayama immediately prior to dhyana is very useful because it clears the mind. You are free of thoughts so that you can concentrate on whatever focus you are putting on during meditation. What is meditation? At least from what I learned in the Mundaka Upanishad, it is continuous flow of the same thought is called meditation. So you allow that process to happen when your mind is clear and you get to the destination where you are planning to go during your meditations and dhyana practice.
Good.
Once you start doing deep breathing, there is an automatic triggering of the parasympathetic response. Balancing starts happening.
Yes, voluntarily activating the parasympathetic system using breathing as a means is what I'm trying to say. We may say in a layman's terms as pranayama. But the important thing is practicing that.
Yeah, so that's why I said in the beginning we need to distinguish between breathing practice and pranayama as in yoga.
But then on the superficial say also, it is pranayama only because it is regulating the breath.
So Guruji, you asked one question: what is sympathetic tone? So today, most of us in most of our lives are always working towards achieving more, going higher, working faster. All these are sympathetic activities. You're unifocused, or you're shifted your goals toward one thing, and the body is actually a balance. Whatever has to go up has to come back to normal, which is the parasympathetic response. So even in your breathing process, we associate left side breathing with parasympathetic response and right side breathing with sympathetic tone response stimulation. That is why we do both. That's why, like when you start pranayama from the yogic concept, we say that exhalation should be more because you are lopsided already. Your sympathetic tone is very high. So you start with inhalation 1, exhale twice. So that is why you start stimulating your parasympathetic response to bring in the balance first.
I see. Interesting. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of science in this, and excellent. Very good discussion. Raghavan, you had a question.
Thank you very much.
Namaste, Guruji. Mine is very layman question only. So we're talking about prana synonymous to breath, but is prana also not same as life energy? Because we also relate prana to any fresh vegetables. We say whenever a vegetable is cut from the tree, it is full of prana, and as days pass by, it loses its prana. So the amount of energy, the life energy we derive by eating it will gradually reduce. The amount of energy we derive is reduced. So we say the prana is very less in that, right? So prana is may not be exactly translatable to breath. That's what I am thinking in my mind. Second question is, you talked about the energy pipeline, right? So is it same as that Kundalini Shakti, which they talk about in yoga, right? Where it actually, we try to do the meditation and to the end of the backbone, right? The spinal end of the spinal cord. They try to imagine it, and with proper gurus, with the techniques, they bring the energy from that backside to that chakra which we have in that brain. I think that's when the illumination happens, and that's what they say Kundalini Shakti. Second and the third one, which I wanted to talk about is so is Krishna is Bhagavan Krishna also emphasizing that we should learn basics of pranayama, yoga, this Kundalini practice, apart from studying the Vedanta, like the pursuing of knowledge, right? Apart from this, we should also learn how to bring that concentrate energy, the prana, to the between the eyebrows. So is he also emphasizing that we should learn that? That is my fourth question. And yeah, these are my questions.
Yeah. So second question first. So the Kundalini Shakti, etc. Yeah, it's all the chakras, Kundalini Shakti, all that is part of this Vidya. One Vidya. I call it as one Vidya. There may be the people who are actually studying it may separate it to different Vidyas. Okay. But for me, it is just one Vidya. Okay. Number one. So then your first question, prana. Question about your prana. How can you translate the word prana? So yeah, in the case of the vegetable example you gave, okay, that prana is the potency. Maybe you can say potency. Okay, potency. So the minute you cut the apple, it's there ready, and then before it, the chemicals degrade and things like that. So that is roughly use the word, they say they use the word prana for that. And because you cut the vegetable from the tree. Tree has prana, obviously. Tree is living, so it has prana. Then you cut it. Then does this vegetable which is cut, separated from the tree, does it have prana or not? That is the question. Now, unlike the animal, where if you cut a part, then the part after some time, I mean, the lizard is interesting. The lizard's tail you cut, and the tail continues to vibrate, throb for a long time, and then before it stops, which is very fascinating. I used to find it to be very fascinating how that can happen, but that happens with the lizard. So, but in any case, prana, in that case, prana is there for some time, the lizard's tail. But here, prana can be there for some time. Can be there. I don't know. I haven't done the science of this vegetables and all that. But yeah, that is prana. That is prana. Then what about here? Well, here, prana is more complicated in the human being. Prana is more complicated because Sukshma Shariram is there, and everything is this energy, the energy that is operating it's all subtle. But the breath is the subtlest thing that you can objectify and control. Therefore, breath is the one that we hold on to. That through the breath, other pranas follow. Other pranas that are there in the body, subtle aspects, controlling kidney function, controlling heart function. This is amazing how you can do that, but it can do that. That's the power. But starts with prana, starts with respiration. So yeah, prana is, we are not simplifying our understanding of prana by using the word breath. Okay, that is the answer to your first question, correct? Then last question. What is Krishna asking us to do? Okay. Is he asking us to practice pranayama, etc., dhyanam, etc.? Well, chapter on dhyanam was done. So the dhyanam we studied. There he talked about pranayama, apane, juhvati pranam, prane, pane, tatha pare, etc. We studied. Okay, I'm remembering now. So clearly, he's actually taking it for granted that we're all doing pranayama. He's taking it for granted, I think. Because he doesn't lecture us on it. That means, see, he doesn't lecture us about sleeping on time. I think he assumes we sleep on time. He doesn't give a big lecture on food. Later on, he's going to talk about food. But he assumes you have proper food and all. Parimita, annam, etc. So he assumes all that. So just because he doesn't say something doesn't mean we should not do it. And so there are certain things he assumes. And periodically, the Yamanima keeps coming. Yataha. So niyatam kuru karma. Niyatam kuru karmatvam. Karmajyayohya karmanaha. So like niyatam. That yama is there right there. Niyama is right there. All these words are very loaded words. So yeah, Krishna does expect us to follow these basic steps of yama, niyama, dhyana, pranayama, etc. must be followed. And asanam also must be followed. We are not following. That's why we are going to this chiropractor and this podiatrist and all these trysts and all are there. We go on to all of them. Orthopedist. Because asanam not there. Simple sitting posture. See, right now sitting itself. Slouch. After some time, we start slouching like this. No, I have to be alert. And so slouch. Don't slouch. So therefore, these are
basics
to me. I think Krishna is assuming that we all follow these things. And
you mentioned that in Asha Seva, like Asha Vidya Gurukulam, we don't, Swamijis did not teach the yogic practices, right?
Yeah, so he assumes we are going to do pranayama, dhyanam, etc. All the things listed in Ashtanga Yoga we practice. But then this particular practice he is talking about. Bhur madhye pranam aveshya samyak. For whom is that? Prayana kale. Okay, at the time of death. We are studying Bhagavad Gita for moksha after death or before death? Before death only, correct. Therefore, once moksha is gained before death, prayana kale becomes irrelevant. Irrelevant. After this life, what will I be? That question itself disappears. So when a question disappears, then the relevant practice also disappears. Okay. But it doesn't mean the practice is not good. It doesn't mean the practice is not useful. If it is done with the proper intention. What is your intention? That is the question. So what is the vivaksha? We call it vivaksha. Vivaksha means intention. What are you intending to do? And that intention is critical. My intention is to go to Brahmaloka. Then these practices are essential. Essential. Omkara, Upasana and all, Taittiriya Upanishad is going to come later. Omiti Brahma, Omiti Idakam Sarvam, Omiti Etadanukritiha Smava, Apyo Shravayetya Shravayenti, Omiti Samani Gayanti, Ogum Shomiti Shastrani Sagumshanti, Omityat Varyuh Pratigaram Pratigranati, Omiti Brahma Prasauti, Omityagnihotra Manujanati, Omiti Brahmanah Pravakshannaha Brahmo Apnavaniti, Brahmaivopa Apnoti. It's all there. And these are upasanas called Omkara Upasana. So there are certain upasanas that become very important if the goal is afterlife. If the goal is afterlife, okay? If the goal is not afterlife, then their importance reduces. I won't say they're not important, but what we get out of them, we focus on Antakarana should be. We focus on Antakarana. We are not talking about being in peak of our health, physical health. No. Peak physical health also is not the goal of Vedanta, correct? Good health, yeah, absolutely. Balanced health, important. Pranayama, dhyanam, do everything. Your food has to be proper, balanced, everything. Important. And then health will automatically improve. But I can't just lead a life to have great health. Goal of life is not to have great health. Correct? Great health is a means, not an end. Therefore, if you look at it like that, then these practices become, severe practices. These are all advanced practices. You can't teach these things to everybody, correct? So nobody will recommend this. Nobody will recommend it. Even ashramas who actually do these things, they won't teach it to everybody. They're also among the people who come there, they will say, no, you just practice these 5 things. Other things we'll worry about later. They'll say that because this is too advanced and you may not need it. Yeah, basics are enough. Shravanam, Shrotavyaha, Mantavyaha, Nididhyasitavyaha for us. Good questions, Raghav.
And one point, Guruji, like in Sandhya Vandanam we do the pranayama. So once Guruji mentioned that if you breathe, if you inhale via the left, it is called Surya Nadi, or if you inhale from the right, it's Chandra Nadi, something like that he mentioned. So we should always inhale from left and exhale from right during the pranayama, and never from right, inhalation from right, because sometimes what people do is we inhale from left, exhale from right, and then inhale from right side, right nostril, and exhale from left. We should not do the other way. Only always from left and right.
Yeah.
It was mentioned.
So yeah, so I've heard about that. I've read a little bit about that, but I don't know. There is somebody in our class who knows these things very well. Okay, you should call Nara immediately after this class. Call Narayananji and Meeraji and have a nice conversation on this. So yeah, whenever I do pranayama, I start with the left, and that's been my childhood habit. But later on, I heard this also, what you said, but I don't know anything more than that. Okay, there must be some more important reasons behind that. So yeah, you're right about all that. Once you get into the science is very involved, very involved. I was, whatever little I gathered from this this yoga, light on yoga by this Iyengar, E.K.S. Iyengar. That book, that was the only source. It used to be there all the time. I used to read that book. Whatever little I know from that only. And so yeah, it's very involved, very involved.
Just one thing to what Raghavan asked is prana and breath connection. So the analogy what we normally give is when you put on the switch, the tube light, you get the light from the tube light, right? So the light is an indication that electricity exists. So breath is an indication that prana exists. But breath is not prana, light is not electricity.
Good. Good. See that? Yeah. Prana. Breath is not prana. Breath is an indication that there is prana inside. So that's why sometimes when the breath is not there, they'll check the pulse. They'll try to see multiple. Why two things? Just in case, you know.
Yeah.
Just in case. Somebody, I heard a story recently. Somebody, they said unpronounced dead. The person wakes up. Recently, it happened in Coimbatore. So yeah, prana is there. Otherwise, waking up from death is not possible. Yeah. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dhanvantaraye Amrita Kalasahastaya Sarvamaya Vinashanaya Trailokyanathaya Shri Mahavishnave Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dhanvantaraye Amrita Kalasahastaya Sarvamaya Vinashanaya Trailokyanathaya Shri Mahavishnave Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dhanvantaraye Amrita Kalasahastaya Sarvamaya Vinashanaya Trailokyanathaya Shri Mahavishnave Namaha. Thank you.
Thank you, Guruji.
Dhanyawada, Guruji.
Hari Om. Take care. Good discussion. Thank you.